Jarrod Danahay, and I'm the CEO of Hover. And along with my amazing team, we are really excited to bring to you the very first CRP Professional Development. Firstly, I do have to give a shout out to Mark and Lang and Dylan and Jarrod.
Oh, gee,
putting together the slideshows. You know, it's great. Yeah, Phil and I just sort of rock up and present it now. But no, really, really big thanks to the team for putting this together. I'm really excited and fortunate to work with an amazing team, and some of them you're going to meet here today. So a little bit about Hover. Go to the next slide, Mike. Hover is now in its 9th year of business, and sometimes it just seems like it's going really fast. We've been so fortunate to work with many of you on this call today over the 9 years. I'm not going to do a huge sale pitch or anything today, but I'll just give you a quick 1 minute on who Hover is. We love to help you move forward. We work with organisations and chief remote pilots to assist you with compliance, approvals, everything from basic approvals like, you know, above 100 foot, EVLOS, BVLOS, flights near or over people, or even to larger UAS as well. We develop a lot of train the trainer packages for chief remote pilots. We do a lot of trial and testing, and more recently it seems to be we're quite busy with a lot of bars audits as well, along with the BVLOS Opta training that we do provide as well. Each of the sections today we're going to have a little bit of time to answer any questions. This is pretty informal. We all work together sort of every day and bounce off each. There's often things I don't know and, you know, walk out the back and see Jarrod. So it's going to be quite an interactive schedule for you all as well. We're going to start with Dylan and Phil with the regulatory. Then we're going to move through to Jarrod and myself doing all of the chief remote pilot discussion. And then at the end, I'm going to sort of fill you in where we talk about the latest consultations, UTMs, FIMS, etc. So we'll start with some introductions. For those who don't know, I already just mentioned it. So I'm the CEO of the Hover team. I'm not really trying not to be a token CEO yet. I still like to be really hands-on. I'm extremely passionate about the drone industry and about seeing drones be utilised as an everyday tool. I look forward to what's next and how it's all going to tie together. For those of you who know me will probably agree, I'm not very patient. I'm really a true entrepreneur and sometimes get really frustrated, just like you, with a lot of the government processes, etc. I do sit on many of the government working groups. I love advocating for what the actual industry needs and trying to get those shackles removed to allow the entire industry to grow at the speed that entrepreneurs like to grow at. Like you, as I said, I get really frustrated with the regulations that don't make sense and the extremely slow wait times. I also act as a chief remote pilot to a few hundred remote pilots across Australia who are doing everything from flying visual line of sights, flights above 400 foot, EVLOS, BVLOS, and flying multiple drones at one time. The one thing I'm really lucky, as I said before, I've got an amazing team, not just to give me a reality check when I come up with the crazy ideas, but I love that we're all really different. We all come from completely different backgrounds. We have a different way of learning. We have very different sense of humours, and we all work really collaborative together. So today I'm going to pass over to Phil. He's going to give a quick introduction on who he is, and then he'll pass to the rest of the team.
Hi all, thanks for attending. It'll be fantastic and I love it to be able to pass on, you know, based on our knowledge and experience throughout the years. For me, I'm the lead consultant with Hobby UAV. My background is with the Australian Army. Let's just say 12 to 15 years of operating large UAS systems, and through that time I've been a remote pilot, a mission commander, a flight instructor, and also the standardisation officer for all UAS operated by the Australian Army. So again, my main role is really to look at the safety cases and really pass on that knowledge that I've obtained over those sort of 15 years conducting beyond visual line of sight operations with large RPA. So that'll do for me. Jarrod?
Hi all, I'm Jarrod. I am the CRP and maintenance controller for Hover, also the SRP for multiple organisations as well. So yeah, I work alongside Jackie with a lot of our clients. So we do day-to-day approvals. Hover itself, we don't do a hell of a lot of flying, but when we do some really impressive stuff with complex systems. We get to trial new hardware and software that comes into the country. So we are basically the guinea pigs that try it out. So that's where we fit in for operational. My background is aviation. It's coming up nearly 30 years since I've been in aviation. I'm manned aviation background. Started flying when I was 17, so before I could even drive. Natural progression was towards drones eventually. As things were starting to slow down in the big world of manned aviation, I thought I'll give drones a bit of a run, and that's the future. So
we've kept him.
And you hang on to me, yeah. So that's me. Dylan.
Hi everyone, I'm Dylan. I'm one of the consultants here at Hover, and I work within Phil's team. I actually come from a professional technical writing and process analysis background and had a bit of experience working with regulators before working with CASA directly here at Hover. I was also an avid recreational pilot, racked up quite a few hundred hours just in a photography sense. And a lot of my work here is now focused on doing manuals and working through the SOAR safety cases and other legislative impacts across the board to our clients. I do occasionally, though, get to sneak out into the field with Jarrod and get to actually go hands-on with the tools, and that experience is then what I translate back to the manuals for our clients.
Perfect. I can see we've got a fair few people on board now, and I can see there's so many people. I see some from mining, government, agriculture, actually a few training organisations, resellers, and a few from the entertainment industry. And we're going to run a few polls through the session. Please bear with us. This is our sort of first webinar as well. So let's just hope it all goes to plan. And I've sort of come up with some polls just to sort of get a gauge of, you know, what people are struggling with. We want to make this an ongoing thing. We really want to support the industry, so we can learn a lot from this. So the first poll that's going to come up, if it comes up, is talking about your top CRP challenges. So there's a list and you can tick all that apply to you. So is it the lack of new regulations and understanding, lack of understanding? So your company might make you move to BVLOS and you've never done it as a CRP, so you might feel that that's one of your challenges. Lack of understanding of external factors like the UTMs, noise approvals, privacy, maintaining compliance in your operation manuals, maintaining logs, applying and developing risk assessments for additional approvals, wait times, getting remote pilots to follow procedures, no one to ask questions. A lot of people, I get a lot of phone calls, so hopefully it's none of the people that work with me every day, because they usually just ring and ask. Conducting internal training, internal change management, so working with those CEOs and management. Next one's about getting support that you need. You as chief remote pilots probably understand where you want to go with the industry, but are you getting the support from your organisations? And also managing safety management systems and incidents as well. So if we can all put any that you're doing, I'll give you a minute.
So our leading winners appear to be CASA wait times, developing new procedures for risk assessments for additional approvals, and maintaining compliance and operation manuals.
Yeah, perfect. All right, we're going to move straight in. Let's just go heavy straight away. Let's move into the regulatory landscape. You know, what's happening, what's changing. There's been, you know, so many different emails. So we're going to pass over to Jarrod and Phil on this one, and I get to be quiet for a little bit.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, you can go to the next slide. So I guess, yeah, whether we like it or not, we are governed by certain rules when it comes to rules and requirements when we operate RPA. And really it's bound through the regulatory framework as we have legislation, so things such as the civil aviation regulations and the civil aviation safety regulations that provide, though, I guess, in a way, that overarching rule set that we need to abide by. Additionally to that, legislative instruments can be issued that provide sort of approvals and additional information against that legislative requirements. And with the legislative instrument, these are typically applied to groups or bodies of people. So they affect everyone, not necessarily just individual organisations or individuals themselves. We then have legislative instruments. Now, while some of this may be issued for things that are under legislation, like the approval of the BVLOS OCTA examination as an approved examination for the conduct of beyond visual line of sight operations. More often than not, non-legislative instruments are issued directly to a single person or organisation. And then finally, beneath that, we have guidance material provided by the regulator themselves. As an example, will be the Part 101 micro and English speaking guide for excluded micro operations. And we do know there is supposed to be some additional guidance being put out for REOC holders from CASA, I think, possibly expecting it sometime mid-year. So further guidance that might relate to, you know, one of the issues was wait times and expectations from CASA for certain applications and approvals. Hopefully that we don't know what that guidance material is going to contain, but hopefully that's the sort of information that's provided in that guidance material when it gets released, hopefully mid-year. The best place to find all the information in regards to legislation, legislative instruments, non-legislative instruments, and guidance materials for your RPA operations is on the CASA website. Mark, can you jump to the next slide, please? And if you scan away, that will provide you a link to that page on their website. And I would recommend that you all throw that in as a favourite, and just every now and then go back and check that page to see if any new ones have been released. It also gives you a bit of an understanding of what other organisations may be getting approved as well, particularly where any exemption that's issued by CASA will appear on this web page, particularly when it's particular to RPAS operations. So it does give you a bit of an understanding of what is being accepted from a CASA perspective by sort of looking through these instruments. And Mark, we're going to provide the link in the comments as well. I'm not sure. Oh, you've already done it? Okay, yeah. Dylan's already done that. So
all over it.
Great team member. Yeah, well ahead of it.
The synergy is strong
today. So that's it in like a quick overview of, I guess, where the rules and what we're bound by when it comes to RPA operations. And I'll pass you over now to Dylan to move forward on some recent changes to the MOS and other instruments and non-legislative instruments that have been released.
Thanks, Phil. So the recent regulatory changes we've seen is what I like to call kind of a series of little quality of life improvements and clarifications, as well as some new and updated instruments and some general aviation changes. So before we go into greater detail, I do want to talk about this last point under general aviation changes for special use airspace. So the headline change is that some restricted airspace sections are now being renamed to military operating areas. And the good thing about this is they still have the same requirements for entry as any restricted airspace did when it was active in the past. And it's a phased rollout as well. So only a few have been updated so far. The phased rollout actually kicked off late last year and it's continuing through. So it's just something to be aware of when you're updating your own manuals, that there is some terminology change coming through here. I'll also just move over to the next slide now, where we're going to dig a little bit deeper into those MOS changes. And I do apologize for clearing my throat. I am recovering from a little bit of illness. So the MOS changes we're talking about today, we're going to focus on the EVLOS updates and the significant and non-significant amendment procedure change. So firstly, with EVLOS, there's some great simplification happening here. So firstly, the requirement to operate your RPA no further than 80% of the OEM listed range has been removed. And that's in favor of a new rule that's centered around C2 link. So you can now operate up to 100% of your OEM operating range in EVLOS Class 2. But there is a requirement that you maintain a stable C2 link throughout that. So depending on where you're operating, there's some common sense that's probably already in practice here, that there are going to be environments where you will maybe only getting 50% of your C2 link due to obstacles or electromagnetic interference. But now if you're going out into a nice flat environment, nice stable terrain, you're no longer limited by that 80%.
Hey, just quick, C2 link, all those, we've got probably a few really new CRPs. C2 link is command and control. So when they talk C2, that's it. Or if they talk C3, it's command, control, and communications.
Exactly, thank you. So with that being said, you do still need to keep the RPA within 1,500 meters of an observer. And there was a change to observers as well. So the maximum distance you can operate from an observer has changed slightly. It's still 1,500 meters in terms of the distance itself, but there's now also the consideration that you need to be able to conduct the responsibilities of an observer whichever distance ends up being less. So particularly for people who are operating a physically small RPA, something like a Mavic Air, for instance, it's one of the considerations about, are you going to be able to conduct your role, which is being aware of that RPA of all times and where it is exactly, if you're operating all the way out to 1500 meters, given how small it is. So it's one of those things that's been updated that you just need to keep in mind when you're planning missions. The last thing that's changed in the EVLOS section has been to the communication requirements. So when operating under EVLOS Class 2, you need to make sure that you have both a primary and redundant inter-crew communication source. Previously, these had to be 2 different devices. So for example, you might use a mobile phone and a UHF radio. Now you can go ahead and use 2 mobile phones or 2 UHF radios. You don't need to have 2 different systems. It is still, from a safety point of view, a really good idea to have 2 different systems, just in case the issue isn't with, say, the mobile phone itself, it's with the network. But if you don't happen to have that additional hardware available, it no longer prevents you from operating. So our next lot of changes are all around amendment procedures and how you submit changes to CASA. So these are the significant and non-significant changes. So what this is going to allow operators to do is you can make quick changes without waiting for CASA to go through and individually review and sign off on your manual. Those will be your non-significant changes. So these are things like fixing up typographical errors or adding RPAs that are already under the existing types you're approved for. So one of the big headlines here is that for a non-significant change, you also don't receive an estimate from CASA. You submit the change with the appropriate form, let them know what the changes are. We're not 100% on their internal process for this, but after a quick review, you generally receive an email back acknowledging the change. Where this is going to be really useful for people is if you're already operating the Mavic 2, you're already approved to fly those 7 kilo and under drones, and you pick up a Mavic 3, you're no longer waiting whatever the lead time is to be able to go out and operate your RPA. And you also don't need to make these changes until, I think the latest date is 2 weeks after you've made the changes to the manual. So that means if you're in a scenario where you need to quickly replace an airframe and it's changed over, you can actually focus on operating first and administrating shortly after. Now, one point with the non-significant changes in particular is that you can't make updates to things like your EVLOS and BVLOS procedures if you happen to have them. These procedures are tied very specifically to your instrument of approval. So any change to those will trigger a significant change. Now, significant changes are going to be similar to what you're used to. So you'll send them into CASA and receive an estimate back. They'll be assigned to an inspector who you'll talk with through the approval. These are things like if you're adding an RPA type that you don't have. So if you're already approved for 7 kilo multirotor and you go up to 25, or if you add in powered lift, and for making big new procedures. So if you add something like BVLOS or above 400 feet, and for whenever you make a change to your key personnel, such as your CRP, CEO, maintenance controller. So these changes still get reviewed by CASA through the normal process. So I'll go over to the next slide now, which is going to be around changes and updates to a variety of instruments. So we'll start off with 0324 and 6523, which are closely related. 0324 supersedes 6423. I know that's a lot of numbers, but we'll name them. So these instruments relate to automated approvals for operations within 3 nautical miles of controlled aerodromes. So specifically, 0324 allows you to use a CASA approved app to gain that approval instead of going through the regular process where you submit an area approval to CASA, pay your estimate, and go through the assessment process there. So the big change for 0324 is that we're adding a new aerodrome, and it's the biggest of the bunch. It's the Sydney Airport Aerodrome. And 6523 also ties into that, which adds a new type of approval to these apps, which is approvals for operations in R405 Alpha and Bravo, which is the Sydney Harbour restricted airspace. So if you're based in Sydney, this is big news for you, particularly if you need to operate in those airspaces, or if you're just looking to get some of that coveted Sydney Harbour footage. 2323 is another big change to how you apply for certain things. So 2323 focuses on military controlled aerodromes. So rather than going through CASA for an area approval to operate within 3 nautical miles of these aerodromes, you'll now take your request directly to the unit that's responsible for that military controlled aerodrome. Now, there are some standard predefined operating conditions and limitations within this instrument, but it's nothing that anyone who's done a 3 nautical mile operation before wouldn't be familiar with. So nowadays, it's as simple for getting approval to fly with these military controlled aerodromes as just reaching an agreement with them. So you can generally look up how to contact them through the URSA. A lot of them now have RPA specific contacts as well. Work out your agreement directly with them, which is as simple as exchanging some operational information and sometimes a copy of your REOC, and then you can start flying directly with them. 2723 is the next one. So this is the Beyond Visual Line of Sight qualification exemption. You would have known this as 4621 in the past if you're an EVLOS operator. What this one does is it now allows you to operate EVLOS Class 2 without holding a relevant BVLOS qualification like IREX or BVLOS Octa. So for a lot of operators, this was a significant barrier to moving from EVLOS Class 1 to 2 because IREX is a very time-dense examination to go through. So if you are currently an EVLOS 1 operator, it's a really good opportunity to move up to EVLOS 2 and mainly do this as an assessment with CASA without needing to go through the process of getting an additional qualification for every pilot. 0117, which is the night instrument, had a pretty small change, but it's a really important one, and that was the requirement to keep a copy of it in your ops manual was removed. And this is in line with CASA's new approach to instruments in general. So they're moving away from keeping a copy of every single instrument you have or operate under in your operations manual, which takes up a lot of pages and a lot of space and doesn't necessarily get referenced all that much in day-to-day operations. Nowadays, you can store all of those things in a document management system or reference directly to the site that we put in the chat earlier, where you would get a copy of any of them. And I do also just want to mention exemption 3523, which is the instrument that enabled the BVLOS Octa examination to be accepted as a substitute for IREX when flying beyond visual line of sight outside of controlled airspace. Much like taking IREX out of EVLOS Class 2, this removes a significant barrier to entry for operators who are looking to move up and do more complicated operations, as the average Octa course runs between about 2 and 3 days. What's our one run?
Yeah, it's 2
2 days.
2 days?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Whereas studying for an IREX is something where you have to make a pretty intense commitment. We generally see the requirement being between 40 and 80 hours. Cool, so that's all for me on the updates from MOS and instruments. I'm going to hand it back over to Phil now, and we're going to talk through the various approvals and where they fall under.
Welcome back. Thank you.
Do you need your glasses?
Sorry, I was saying, no, I'm not.
I thought you were squeezing. Oh, yeah.
I can see. I'm just seeing if I'm looking any good on video. Probably not. So with approval, so I guess really this is just highlighting what we're seeing from a consultant platform and where people are moving from an industry perspective. So, yeah, and there's really 2 types of, I guess, approval processes. One sort of area where, okay, like the above 400 foot, you need approval to operate within the no-fly zone of a controlled aerodrome that's not covered under one that you can go through the CASA safety or CASA approved safety apps to get that automatic approval, and more often than not the BVLOS area approval. And then you have those approvals specific to an organisation, so more an operational type where you're looking at extended visual line of sight operations, your night VLOS operations, and above 400 feet atypical. So whilst that's in a way, that one's a little bit funny, it is still an area approval in a holistic sense, but you get an Australia-wide approval to conduct operations above 400 feet in atypical airspace, wherever you could be within Australia, with possibly some limitations. The other thing that we are seeing a lot of organisations move to is the conduct of beyond visual line of sight and extended visual line of sight from or utilising remote operations, or the activity is conducted from a remote operations centre. So the key bit to pass on there is that just because you have an EVLOS Class 2 approval does not mean you have the ability to conduct remote operations. And that will need essentially a significant change to be submitted, some procedures written for the use of a remote operations centre, and an assessment to be conducted on your remote operations centre at a specific address, and that address will be included in your EVLOS instrument. So the processes and processing time for these different types of approvals does change slightly, and I think that will be the next slide. There we go. So as I said there, Class 1 typically is just an application only. EVLOS does have its own sort of application form compared to sort of standard area approvals. Class 2 will require you to have a flight assessment. It does expand, as Dylan's already mentioned, expand your operational distance to that 1,500 metres or beyond if you're utilising multiple observers. And if for a lot of organisations, EVLOS Class 1 is typically what they need, particularly where they're utilising FPV as part of their equipment when they're conducting their operations. BVLOS, it will typically require a safety case conducted using the specific operations risk assessment methodology. At this stage, it is only approved for a specific area, and it does scale in complexity. So depending on the risk environment, the expectations of you as an organisation may increase in regards to the procedures that you may need to implement, the training you need to conduct, and conversely, you may also need further evidence provided from a manufacturer depending on the outcome of the risk environment, and that's safety case study of where you want to operate. For the first time for a BVLOS approval, you will require to undertake a CASA flight assessment, but post that, all you need to do, once you have that initial BVLOS flight assessment and approval, moving to different areas will only require you to have an additional area approval conducted. You won't need to conduct another flight test with CASA. Remote operations sort of already got into that. You know, it's awesome. You can operate your system. You can operate your RPA systems from one central location from all across Australia. So with your systems in different parts of Australia. You know, saves downtime. You don't need to send remote pilots. You know, cost effective. The key thing, as you mentioned, at this stage for any remote operations, it requires a fixed address. And if you were to have multiple remote operations centres scattered around different states, you would have to, at this stage, have each of those remote operation centres assessed by CASA. Ops near people, probably a key topic at the moment.
The source of a lot of my phone calls every day.
Source of a little bit of a frustration over the last 6 months, but things are progressing. So from what we know at this stage, CASA are now re-accepting applications for operations near people. And this might mean that you want to either operate within 30 metres of people without obtaining their consent, or it might be that you want a reduction of the 15-metre limit with consent, you know, to within 1 metre or even possibly over people. So in regards to the application, it is varying. It could be a safety case or a SORA safety case required. It could just be a standard risk assessment. And this will really be based on whether the area you're operating is a controlled ground area or it's not in your control. So, you know, an area that you can control, or maybe just in a residential environment, as an example, the weight of the RPA that you need to operate in that specific area, and then also your ability to either obtain explicit consent, implied consent, so just informing people, and if they enter an area that they're aware that there is RPA operations occurring, or conversely, it could be that there is no consent given at all. We're still trying to work out what that approach is, and hopefully over the next couple of months, we'll be able to provide more guidance on that, and we can, or if you need to do that type of operation, we can sort of reach out and we can provide that. What we sort of know, but it's not, unfortunately, we can't say it's confirmed guidance at this stage. Next, thanks.
Remember, everyone, questions. this is a great time to sort of ask any questions. So use your Q&A and start asking questions, and hopefully we can answer them.
So I guess a quick overview of the application process. Yeah, for you that have applied for things, it's relatively standard. You prepare what you need from an application form and your safety case or updated procedures. One of the changes that CASA has implemented, if you are utilising an agent like Hobby UAV to assist you in your application, then we now require a declaration from the client to us to say that you have allowed us to work on your behalf and that you've provided us true and correct information. We then also now need to provide a declaration to CASA stating that you have approved us and that we've, I guess, conducted the application in accordance with any direction that you've provided. From there, the submission occurs and CASA should issue you an estimate. And the key thing there is once an estimate is issued, I implore everyone to get in there and pay their estimate as soon as they can, because essentially it drives the next component of the process. Being now you get moved into an unassigned queue. So this is a relatively new process that CASA is trialling, where once your estimate has been paid, your application will be split into an unallocated queue, typically based on whether the application is a simple or complex application. And you should receive emails to identify where you sit in this queue. Now, at this stage,
Friday night.
Yeah, it'll sort of come late Friday. It's done from one of the inspectors in WA. So you get you get an email indicating your position in that unallocated queue. Once you get to number one, it essentially means once an inspector has scope to start assessing your application, it will then be assigned to an inspector. From there, once assigned, an inspector should reach out, and if you have been told that you've moved from the unassigned queue to an inspector and you don't hear from them, you should be reaching out and asking when you can expect them to start the application. Unfortunately, once you're assigned to an inspector, it doesn't necessarily mean they are going to start on your application that day. There could still be a couple of weeks before they start looking at your application. It just means, they might have 3 or 4 applications on the go at one time. If 5's their limit, then once they have that scope to receive a new one, it'll get added to their lot of work. Timelines, I think that was one of the things that were brought up in the poll in regards to wait times. All we can say, we are seeing an increase in wait times, and it's more to do just with the number of applications that are going in. I'm not too sure what, in our position, we're quite lucky. We sort of get to see the climb in RPAS application numbers as they come back for specific jobs.
I don't know. In the first month in January, they're up to 1,600, and I think it's already up to about 3,000 that they've received already.
I don't know if you saw one recently, but yeah, I think last time I looked, mid or start of March, they were already up to 2,500 sort of applications, and that's not counting obviously what's been submitted for 2024, and whether there's still things holding over from 2023. So we are seeing extended wait times, and the 30 days is probably out the window. From my perspective, any type of standard sort of area approval, recommend where you can, your planning and lead time is 60 days. This sort of moves out if there's any sort of complexity or an EVLOS class 2 where an assessment's required, you're probably looking at 3 to 4 months. And then for your initial, if it's an initial BVLOS, it could be anywhere between probably 5 to 6 months. Again, really dependent on the complexity of the environment that you're going to operate in.
And the completeness of your application. I mean, we all have to work together, I think. So it's really making sure that what you're inputting does actually meet the requirements, or reach out to, to us or a consultant to get that assistant to try and get the application in correctly at the beginning.
Yeah, and this obviously is also, this is just about wait times. Lead times for application. You also need to understand that from a BVLOS perspective, where a more in-depth safety case might need to be written, you still need to allow time for that work to be conducted as well.
Question coming there. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can look at it.
Yeah, so the question we just received from Sean is whether or not CASA has given any indication on how it intends to manage the workload and get back to their original timeframes.
I think it's an ongoing tackle that they're trying to do, and is to set that guidance and that that acceptable means of compliance, so people know what they're expecting, so the applications can be complete to start with. I believe they're going to put out KPIs. For those who've been in the industry for a while, I used to love that on their website. They just removed the RPAS one about a year and a half ago. They used to have actually KPIs, so where they're at, so you could just like jump on and go, yep, you're expecting this. There's also one thing, just to be careful, I can't remember the instrument off the top of my head, but there's something that the higher management has thrown back at me for a few clients recently, is you shouldn't be accepting work. Do you remember what instrument number that is?
The regulation.
It's a regulation, and it's that hierarchy, like it's higher. The regulation says you cannot accept work if you're not approved to do it. So we have been thrown back that a little bit lately, going, well, people shouldn't actually be accepting work. I don't personally agree with that, because I get you're all entrepreneurs, probably like me, and you sometimes need that contract to actually then, afford to be able to put the application in. But just to let you know that we've had that thrown back at us a few times.
We also have another question about the requirements for operating BVLOS in an enclosed space, such as underground. Phil, do you want to answer that?
You can.
Yeah, you right.
I'm going
to let them know it's not a huge process, though. I know even on a quote, I think it's 4 or 5 hours of our work to do this. So don't be hugely stressed by it, but you can explain the process.
Yeah, so enclosed BVLOS is application only. There's no flight assessment for it. So it's just about sorting out your procedures and having them approved by CASA. Probably the biggest takeaway we have for enclosed BVLOS is that you need to be able to operate it in a way where you can guarantee the RPA won't escape without being recaptured under VLOS. So you don't have to be entirely in a sealed box like we are at the moment. You can have an opening to fly into, as long as your remote pilot is positioned right there and ready to take back over should the RPA start to escape out of it. And every other door has got to be shut. We have one more question as well from Chris here. A CRP flying competency, is it important / essential for the CRP to have significant flying hours, or is the CRP role more of a really good understanding of compliance and oversight?
Depends on what sort of CRP you are. Look, I'm CRP for a lot, and I think I'm a really good CRP, just to throw that out there. I'm a terrible drone pilot. I'm a good BVLOS pilot, but on sticks, I've got no. I still, when you do a figure eight, have to move my body with it. So let's just put that out there. But I'm a really good CRP. I completely understand how the systems work. I understand the compliance and the regulations. So you can work together as a team, and we are going to talk a little bit about type specialists.
Senior remote pilot usage. Yeah.
We're going to talk a little bit about like senior remote pilots and type specialists, and having, people, the way you structure your REOC allows people, not need to have, you don't need to fly every drone on that REOC as well.
Yeah. And I think if I can just add a little bit to that too, is that it also depends on the type of organization you have. If you're purely an RPA operator and you're a small organization, the CRP probably is doing a lot more of those things like training. Whereas if you're a very large organization, the CRP is then going to probably shift more in line with what Jackie does, where it's making sure you're keeping with the regulations, but you bring in an expert trainer to talk about how you control the drone itself.
Yeah. 100%.
Cool. So I think that's all our questions for now. So
keep firing them through, though. As I said, it's a chance. We'll answer as much as we can. I'm going to throw another poll. Oh, actually, no. One quick question, Phil. So we've got a little bit of time for you.
Yep.
Can you quickly explain, because it's one that I get asked on the phone a bit, for those that, talking about the SAW and everything, just quickly talk about SAW in version 2 to version 2.5.
Okay. So currently the risk assessment methodology is under version 2, and it is very, get the term right, quantitative sort of risk assessment methodology for both assessing the air and ground risk. Now, while the SORA itself was brought in to try and harmonise that risk assessment process between the applicant and the competent authority, that quantitative nature can still have a lot of variance in you know, what is a sparsely populated versus a populated area. What is an assembly of people? Is it 10 people just standing outside a bus stop? Is it 100 people? Is it 100,000 people gathered in a stadium? So because it uses, because of the terms that are used, it can make the process still quite difficult, and you will have those differences between CASA and the applicant. You know, we might say we think something's sparsely populated, but then the regulator has a different thought on that. Can cause a lot of frustration. Currently, version 2.5 is, you know, we're hoping that it's ratified by mid-year and then maybe in use by CASA by the end of this year. Now, what that does at this stage, only from a ground perspective, it provides qualitative numbering to the population density. So rather than working in a bit of a grey area and utilising terms like sparsely populated, the ability to assess the risk, both from an applicant and a regulator perspective, will be set by numbering. So it'll be, you know, are you operating in an area that has less than 250 people per square kilometre, or is it 25 people per square kilometre, or is it 2.5, or it could extend. So it should make the assessment and the understanding of the ground risk environment a lot easier to articulate, both from our end and the regulator end.
Yeah, perfect. Look, we obviously write a lot of SORAs. That's what we sort of do most days, but we also do some SORA training. So if it's something you want to learn, you know, reach out. For those that follow the EATP, we did win a grant about 1.5 years ago to create an automated SORA sort of risk process. We have actually quite finished that, and we have presented that to the regulators. That we're just trying to find out how it can be utilised every day, but we're really hoping, you know, it will start to streamline, or hopefully it's uptaken by the regulators, that it'll start to streamline this application process for you all, or be able to utilise it as a tool to then get Australia-wide approvals.
Yeah.
I'm going to move to, do we have one more question?
We have two more. So
Okay.
one from Stephen Young. When adding training for observers into your REOC, CASA does not specify the requirements. Is it best to leave requirements as less is more, given anything added to the REOC must be followed?
I break down, we discuss this all the time because observer is spotted, because observers does have an official part in the mods now if you are doing EVLOS.
Yeah.
So sometimes we sort of break it up as a trained observer. That's how you've
Yeah.
been writing it through or to a spotter, and with the spotter not having any formal qualification.
Yeah, and I think as well with the recent instrument change that talked about the observer having the ability to complete their role being the priority over the maximum distance from them, that there's certainly, even if it's not strictly detailed in the MOS, enough legislation around to kind of communicate what CAS is looking for in observer requirements. But yeah, if you need assistance with figuring out what those are, just let us know.
Yeah.
We also have another question from Simon, which is operations in populous areas.
Oh, thanks, Phil. I get too frustrated on this.
So operation over houses and commercial properties for inspection work. It's becoming impossible to carry out this type of work. Are there ways around this? Simon also said that an application to CASA is obviously a way to go, but the answer is almost always no. I understand operation over people and the dangers involved. I would think that working over a property would provide a level of protection to the person inside. And what is the populous area exactly?
Is that going to be to me, is it? Yeah, right. Oh, yeah, right. I'm only joking. Yeah, look, it is a very interesting rule. Now, unfortunately, the regulation does not, the 30-metre rule is what it is. It's a 30-metre rule. It doesn't matter. It doesn't differentiate as to whether someone is in a house or in a car, in a building. Should I use to say in a bomb shelter?
I think
yeah, we'll say a bomb shelter. In a bomb shelter. The 30-metre rule is just it. Where a person could be, unless you have verified that someone is not in that area, then you are not allowed to operate within 30 metres of that. Now, Populous is interesting. There is, the definition within CASA, within the regulations in regards to populous area, but where that ability on you is to determine, do I class it as a populous area because I see an increased risk, or to people or property? You can make that determination, but you've got to be comfortable that you've made it. Now, it does get a bit, when you look at practicality of that from a residential environment at particular times of the day, yes, from a raw population perspective, you could say the area is populous, but at a specific time of day, it's unlikely that you could really say that it's a populated area just for the number of people that are actually around. That's a bit of still the grey area. And when you apply SORA, as we might have to, I guess that definition changes a little bit in regards to what you actually have to prescribe as an initial populous area. And a residential environment should really be considered as a populous area unless you can, I guess, prove otherwise. Approvals are allowed. There are exemptions to operate in populous areas through the use of parachute systems, and we can provide guidance, and it really comes down to the specifications of, or specificity of what you want to do, and that's probably the real important component of operations near people, what you need to achieve. And it's probably hard to discuss here because there's so many variables, and it's probably better to reach out on one-to-one to talk your specific requirement when it comes to it.
I hear your frustration. I know your frustration, Simon, and
probably didn't answer the question, but
huge portion of the industry are facing this at the moment. It's also frustrating because other regulators like the CEA and FAA, there's other tools that they can say, when people are shielded or sheltered, that they can fly over that, or so we're hoping that when they do publicly release that guidance for the close proximity, that some of that's taken into account to make those shielded or sheltered, if they are in some form of house, be a lot easier of a process. And hopefully you don't have to go down a full SORA process. And it's more just how you manage that with procedures. So that's what we're hoping for. Yep.
It's a 2 year.
Should we move to the next, or is there one more?
We do have 2 more questions. So I think what we might do is go through these ones. Continue to add them though, guys, because with the Q&A, we can mark them off as we answer them. So we will get to
do these 2, then we'll push to Jarrod.
We'll go over to me.
So we'll start with Luke. In terms of SORA training, do you discuss both 2.0 and 2.5, or is it worth waiting for the version change if it's not urgent to the organisation?
We
I wouldn't do so at this stage. Wouldn't do training towards 2.5 because the draft for consultation was released and they've gone back, and there's still going to be changes to the actual 2.5 version. So at this stage, there's no point. I wouldn't really train towards 2.5 until the final version gets released.
We probably verbally say a lot, so we somehow scanned a copy of like the new annexes and the new consultation, and obviously because we had to write the SORA mate, we weren't going to write it to something that's going out, so we have written the whole SORA mate to version 2.5, so we're quite familiar with that 2.5 process. We do still, even when we write, we do take into some of the considerations of 2.5, but if you're going to write it in the next few months, you need to write it to 2, so that's what we're still training to.
And lastly, just for now, Jeffrey has asked, why does CASA seem to treat operations with drones as more dangerous than manned aviation? Each year there are multiple deaths in the manned aviation sector.
Who's that from?
Jeffrey.
I agree with you, Jeffrey. And it's something that I know sometimes I'm a little bit outspoken, which gets me in trouble, but I agree. Like there's some silly regulations, like, they've already deemed that you can fly an 1,800 kilogram sports aviation over a house because it's very unlikely that it will penetrate through and cause a death. But for some reason, I don't know how your 2 kilo Mavic is going to penetrate and actually kill the person in the house. So yes, there is. Some of those regulations need to be changed from both sides. It's not, we're the new players in here, but we really need to sort of, push that regulator to look at their current regulations. So yeah, I'd be, I'm going to talk a little bit about getting involved with consultations and working groups a little bit later. So that's probably one way you can, I agree. We all need to start sort of saying we need these changes.
Yeah, 100%.
I got another poll. Back to me.
No.
Quick poll. This one's a really quick one. So you should be able to do this really quickly, but it's meant to give the team a break. How many remote pilots do you have in your team, including excluded and re-op? Because I know a lot of you, you know, operate both. So just, yeah, quickly answer. It's just mostly so we can gauge when Jarrod and I are talking, if we're more talking to sole operators or, hey, you've got 50 people, like imagine you've already got your structures in place. Any big ones? Oh yeah, a few big ones.
We're heavily favoured so far to 6 to 15, but a surprisingly high percentage in 51 to 100.
Yeah, perfect. Which is sort of how I don't know, foresee it. A drone is a tool that, you know, I can imagine the ones with 51, they're not 51 drone pilots, like that's not their full-time career. They're, you know, they're surveyors or they're environmental or whatever there may be. And a drone is just a tool on how you utilize that, which is good because that's sort of how
That's how it is.
that's how we've sort of prepared our presentations through. Where I guess the ones where it's 1 to 5, you may be from, you know, a smaller drone business where drones is your full-time job. So.
Yeah.
Pass on to Jarrod.
All right. Hi, guys. Next slide, Mark. Yeah, cheers.
Next one.
You can go to the next one again if you like. So today we're just going to discuss what we sort of see as, well, because Jackie and I both do it, as chief remote pilot, senior remote pilot roles, what we get asked, deficiencies we see, just general operational day-to-day, what people ask, what happens for certain conditions. So first one I start with is internal training. So inductions. So we do deal with clients all down the east coast of Australia, and we always get asked, how do we induct these people? Obviously, we can't be on a, you know, flying down every second week to induct people. So we've actually introduced remote inductions to do that. So first of all, we'll say if you've got compliance software, do use it to its full extent. It does help out the process incredibly with management. Yeah, trying to, if you do have it, have a good understanding how your aviation compliance software works. And then just moving into the remote induction part of it. So what we do with our inductions, we now do an online process. So we will put together a meeting to do an online induction for a presentation, including the use of the compliance software. So a big part of it now is most people come to us, they have a REPL, they know the rules or the most of the rules. So we have a refresher of the rules. We go through company specific procedures and tasks. And then we'll move into, which we think is the main part now, is the compliance software. A lot of people know the rules, they don't know how to drive the software. So a lot of our induction is based on how does that software actually work to help them use and streamline their system for approval and flying their drone. So
we spent a lot of time. I think the biggest part was, you know, they're doing other jobs. We had to try by using compliance software out there. It allows you to automate a lot of the things that the pilots. We just found that the pilots just don't do it. Like, let's just like be truthful. Half them, if you make it long and, you know, onerous on them, they actually don't.
They'll just be non-compliant.
Correct.
If it all gets too hard.
So we just find that we try to automate it, put as many tools in place and algorithms at the back end to sort of stop or, you know, allow the auto logs to go through. And, you know, setting that compliance software up is so important. Yeah,
we think it's a big part of what it is now. So if you've got a big operation, you're still running off paper, I would express, have a look at automation software. It makes life a lot easier. We also then do assessments online. We utilize a form system where we'll send out an assessment, a link in the form of a link that we can change the questions whenever we want. We base it on about 50 questions and we send it out for just to see how proficient that person is. And this assessment will form the first proficiency check basically as the theory part of it. Actually, go back one. You got too excited on me. From that, we gauge where the person's at. If they need some more work, we can train them a little bit further. As I said, most times they come to us with a good grasp of the knowledge. From that, then we also do remote video assessments, and the ARP has training component where they need to understand the system they're operating. Now, once again, a lot of people we deal with, they utilize DJI equipment, and it just seems a given. People know how to use DJI equipment. They've used it during their REPL training and they've brought it over. So we don't need to spend too much time actually training people how to use the hardware. What we want to see is that they can actually use the hardware appropriately with the software. So you can go to the next slide now.
One of the things that I got stuck over the last few months as well is, you know, I'd inducted like 70 pilots into, you know, the DJI software, but then all of a sudden they started using, you know, you've got other automation software, or like all these other software. but then they're not very familiar with those fail safes as well. So that's the one thing that I'm getting a little bit more stricter on, and I think, you know, be aware of as the software start changing. It's that type induction. It's not just to the aircraft. It should actually be to the software as well.
Exactly. System.
Yeah,
the system. Think about the system rather than just the type.
So this is what some of the items covered during that induction. So just a presentation includes introduction to the reopen company, CASA regulatory requirements, just a refresher normally, information on ATSB requirements, how to access relevant documentation. It's obviously a big part of it. Once you go to an online digital environment, people need to know how to access the required documentation. So you don't just have a folder sitting up on the shelf anymore. You need to know where to go to find the information you need. And when we just do a basic overview also on dangerous goods, there are dangerous goods involved with the operation, the LiPo batteries in particular. So we just step our way through. It's a slide process. Knowledge assessment, as I said, it's an online form. And then the training, we basically have pilots send in, we will set them tasks and get them to send in a video of them operating their system. And that'll include pre-operational briefings, pre-flight checklists, a takeoff, a landing, some manoeuvring in the air, discussions about emergency procedures. What else do we cover? A bit of anything on a day-to-day basis of how they operate their aircraft.
We still try to do, like, I still, you know, advocate for that face-to-face type training. If
as much as we can.
Yep. And definitely when we, like, this is just my comfort level as a CRP, because obviously we hold liability for this. Usually when I start operating out standard operating conditions, we only allow, like, if we're doing BVLOS sign-off, that's face-to-face and things like that. But I guess it's that call to make. Sometimes it's not, you know, worth traveling across to the Pilbara or somewhere for, you know, one induction when they've already got, you know, 3 senior pilots on site. So, yeah, and, you know, getting them to see or doing a video is much easier.
So, yeah, we have had that question quite a few times, like, how are we doing the inductions remotely? And it can be done. CASA have seen the process. They're quite happy with it. We've been through surveillance events and they're quite happy with it. Everything's logged. We still utilise the aviation compliance software to help log the assessments and everything remotely. The difference is we're just not standing in the field with them. So, proficiency, currency, or recency. Now, this one can confuse a lot of people, as we've discussed many times. So there is a difference between proficiency and currency. So just up on, there's the definitions there. So the easy way is currency refers to meeting the legal requirement for recent flight experience. Proficiency refers to being adequately skilled. So they're two different things. People mix up, they get them mixed up. It doesn't help with some software does mix it up itself. So you need to be careful about that. Proficiency is making sure that your pilot is able to do their task appropriately and safely. The currency or recency, that can be used as the same. That is, have they done that flight or have they done their required flights as per your requirements in your operations manual? So are they actually recent? So they are two separate things. A lot of people get that one confused. So just do be aware of that. Like I said, it can get a little bit confusing.
There's no standard for, I mean, I know CASA manuals have some things written in it, but it doesn't mean you have to stick to that standard for recency. You can make that, you know, stricter if you want, or, you know, you can change it to suit how you operate. That's right.
The drones are getting easy to fly. There's no questioning that. So the drones themselves are getting easy to fly. So, you know, the proficiency and the currencies, they can be changed considerably.
Probably the key thing is understanding what the skill grade is. So if I teach someone to operate a drone or a specific RPA, how long is it going to be until they lose that knowledge and need to be refreshed? And that sort of drives where your currency needs to probably sit at. So that skill fade is, they're going out doing that flight, maintaining that recency and currency, and then move. Now that'll just, you might set a particular thing to start with and then adjust as you move into things. And it depends if you're a full-time operator or sort of a part-time operator as well. So that's right. Just those things to consider.
And once again, use your compliance software if you've got it. You can set up automations in a lot of software. We use AVCRM a lot. That's the one I'm basing, what you can see on the screen there. We have automations in place that will limit the pilot's operational availability. So, you know, if they're good to go, they can do all the aspects that we've allowed them. They'll get warnings. If they get to a point where they haven't hit their currency, the software will actually cut them out, that they can only now do a recurrency flight. So do use that automation, particularly when you have hundreds of pilots you're trying to manage. It's very hard to manage it using, you know, something non-automated or an Excel sheet or something. This, if it's internal, it makes life a hell of a
As you move to things like BVLOS as well, there's different requirements as well. So it's,
Exactly,
you've got to manage, you know,
multiple.
different-
One pilot might have multiple requirements for recencies and proficiencies because they're operating multiple types of operations. So,
and it might, the currency or recency requirement might not necessarily just be allocated to your ability to fly that aircraft. It might actually be more pertinent to have currency related to how you conduct a specific task, not just
tick a box.
operating and flying the aircraft and, you know, taking off, putting it in a hover for 5 minutes and landing. The actual important bit is you're actually out doing a specific task.
So what,
you know, because
normal
normal operation might be operating, you've got to operate, you know, within a certain distance from obstacles, etc.
Yep.
And if you can't achieve that, you know, and you're not maintaining that, then you can't do the job and the task. So yeah, there might be different things when it comes to what you actually need from a currency
vary.
perspective.
Yep. Next one, Mark. Okay, so we brushed on this earlier. Senior remote pilot and type specialist. So you have got tools that you can use to help manage your organisation. So you can promote senior remote pilots within the company. I'm one of them. Jackie's done it.
Yeah.
So I work alongside very closely with Jackie to help her manage large operations.
Most of the big companies will already be utilising this, but yeah, we get sick and sometimes it's like to assign work across to someone else.
Have a long breakfast and Jarrod's there working away. but yeah, do use them. It can help, particularly even on you have multiple sites for your operation. You may want to see your remote pilot on each of your sites to help you manage those crew at the actual site. So the type specialist we mentioned earlier, that can be used when the CRP doesn't have the appropriate qualification for a specific system. So for example, if you had a powerlift aircraft you want to operate and the CRP does not hold a powerlift license, you can have someone who may hold that license nominated to be the type specialist within the organisation. What's involved from a manual side for that? What's the
standard these days?
For a manual, it's really just, I guess, identifying the roles and responsibilities of that type specialist. And from an application perspective, it's 10102 to say you want a REOC variation to add that powerlift category. You just let them know who the type specialist is going to be and provide a copy of their REPL to demonstrate that they hold the appropriate license, and then you can operate it under your organisation.
Yep, cool. One question that's been brought up, and Jackie, you just yesterday, common question we hear is, must the CRP hold the OCTA IRX exam to allow BVLOS operations within the company? The answer is no. As long as someone on the team operating the aircraft has the qualification, that appeases the requirement. So the CRP
they don't even need to be there for the I try to get out as many BVLOS flight tests as possible. They don't actually need to be there, because all CASA are assessing when they go do a BVLOS flight test is how they've been trained. So if you haven't been able to train them as a CRP, hopefully you've worked with a company like us or someone that can train that staff up. So yeah, they're looking at, you know, how the pilots operate. Right. So if they operate well, they've assumed they've been trained well by that CRP. So no, you don't need to hold it.
The ops manual. So the ops manual is a living document. It should be updated periodically to suit the workflow and process of the workplace. So a lot of companies fall into the trap. They'll change the processes, but forget to update the manual to suit. And that's fine. Things do change. But you've got to keep in mind, CASA are using your ops manual if you have a surveillance event. They don't know your operation. They don't work with you day to day. So everything they see, they're basing what they see in the ops manual. So if they don't align, that's where the problems start. So just keep that in mind. It is a living document. As Dylan said earlier, you do have the option now for non-significant changes. So you can make some small changes yourself without the need to go through the whole CASA assessment. It's basically a self-assessment on that one, is it? Do they actually assess it?
Yeah, it's real quick.
Yeah, it must just brush through. And but safety always comes first. That's the main thing. So if you see that you can make a change within your document that will help safety, that should always come first.
You know, the one thing gosh, Cass might convince this, but the one thing I think you could do as well is if you've got a safety issue, like if you are having incidents and you need to change something from the manual, but you're like, oh my gosh, like this is going to be a significant change, but we need to do this for safety, just implement it and then make sure you email them and tell them you are utilising the new manual, even though it's a significant change, because it's due to safety. Safety always has to come first. Sure. Just make sure you make it very clear what you're doing with them. But if you do need to change it, don't, as I said, I had a situation recently and I'm like, but what am I meant to do? I'm meant to stop because of their wait times for just a significant change is 2 months. Am I meant to stop flying for 2 months? And yeah, that's where that came about.
Yeah. Okay. Next one, Mark, please. SMS. So we just brush lightly on the safety management system. So just a few things we've introduced that have helped us over the period. We introduced the no track, the notice to remote air crew.
Oh my gosh, you were such a dork. You put trademark.
That is I made this. I made this. So what it is, it's basically like a NOTAM, but we use it internally, and we can send out the no track to all the pilots for a safety concern, or maybe an update that's upcoming to an ops manual, or something that needs to be highlighted. So we do use that internally now. It's becoming a standard with a lot of the manuals that we put together. So it does give that. It gives you a formal way to advise those pilots of something that's happening, because we found if you just send out bulk emails, a lot of them just get deleted or missed. This way, we actually incorporate into the safety management. Into the safety compliance software.
So they have to sign.
And they have to sign off on it to say they've seen it. So
because I mean, for those using any compliance software, but Faviston, you get so many emails a day that they sort of just get filtered into things. So at least you know that they've read that important safety message.
And we've found the best way over the time is to guide your crew towards compliance. Like people don't do this full time all the time. It might just be a side hustle for flying. So we guide them now using the compliance software, particularly through the SMS system. This one, once again, based on our CRM, because that's what I had available. We basically prompt the remote pilot what they need to do to keep compliance. So as you can see on the screen there, if they can nominate where they're flying, and it'll give them a little note what they need to do. If they're in a restricted area, attach the approval. If they're operating BVLOS, make sure you attach what instrument you need to attach, because we know people can get bamboozled by the amount of documents and legislation and compliance that has to happen. So we just sort of help them, guide them along. We found it's working much better. Pilots have an understanding now, situational awareness, where they're operating. That's a big part of it. That's one thing we make them define now. We've also introduced checklists internally for accident and incident response, because we have had a few happen over the last few months. So we've had to find a way that is a standardized process when things do go wrong. So we have introduced that recently. Yeah.
Also, look, I also add in my SMS, compliance breaches, and I write them all the time. It's also, so when I get to an audit, the very first question we'll go through it, they'll ask is, do you have anything to declare? And once you declare it, it means if they find it, you don't have to fill out all the paperwork. So sometimes it's just easier to declare. But, I had one yesterday that just on, time zones or something like that, that, the way that a software converted the daylight savings across didn't work. And I've had one that, occasionally logs will go down, like auto logs from all the different compliance software, or the decryptor code from DGI or the SDK isn't working correctly. So you might be sort of in breach for a week while that's being fixed. I just log it, because then if it ever comes back.
Yep. Just transparency. If we do have a surveillance event, it's there. We know it's there.
Or if there's an incident, what processes that you had in place.
Exactly. Is there a question there?
We'll keep going.
We'll do
questions in a minute.
Next one. Okay. NOTAM. So NOTAM lodgement is becoming a more common requirement with the increase in complex RPAS operations. So the current process you're mostly aware of is sending it through CASA RPAC, and it can take days to get your NOTAM in. There is actually the option to become a NOTAM originator that we've achieved it here. I've been through it. It makes your life so much easier. Dylan has looked into it recently. So the requirement is you basically just contact Air Services as a certain department, and they can send you the right way to what has to happen for you to become the originator. Next page, Mark. So it definitely speeds up the process. You can actually have a NOTAM ready within minutes. So it's a simple process through the NAPE system. You just log in as you used to, but you'll now have a tab that allows you to do NOTAMs. And then you can just put your NOTAMs straight into the system. There are some guidelines you need to follow, which you can download readily. And then you can also store that as a template directory. So all your NOTAMs you can store, and you can literally have a NOTAM into the system within minutes. And I found sometimes within 10 minutes, your NOTAM is up and running. So it really does speed up the process. I think CASA like it as well from after talking to inspectors, because they have to deal with those when they come into work straight away, having to do all the NOTAMs and the problem of the way they're put together. So this will definitely be something that the more complex operations where you require the NOTAM, I recommend to sign up for this one.
Need
Questions.
something on a weekend or something on a weekend games and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
and you can make changes to the NOTAMs on the fly as well. You can actually just log in, make the change. It goes to the NOTAM office. That's manned 24/7. Look, they will ring you up if they've got issues with it. I've had it happen many times myself. If you just have one thing incorrect, but eventually you'll have it down pat exactly what they want to see when you input the data. So, next one, Mark. Internal compliance, just ongoing health checks should be carried out. Most of us would do this anyway, just put it there. So during some audits, what we often see is inaccurate control logbooks. Like that is a requirement as 101, you need to have a control logbook under the REOC. I've seen logbooks with 8,000 hours for one day. So keep an eye on the logbooks. That is one that catch people out. It can be an issue with the automation side of things if the automation is incorrect. So it is one to watch. Sometimes it can bite you that one.
It just, like, I mean, I am talking to DGR later today, but just be careful because sometimes, as I said, the decryptors and that do go down. So if you're using air data or whatever you're using, sometimes you think that all the logs are going across and that, it's fine, it's the automation set up. But, in the last 3 weeks, we know there's a big issue with the DGI logs at the moment. So actually maybe only 2 of the 10 logs come across. So do a spot check.
Yeah, check for accuracy because it's really easy to notice in compliance software when someone's flown a 48-hour day in one day. So just keep an eye on it. Look, 99% of the time it works beautifully and it saves a lot of hassle, but when it doesn't work, it can cause dramas straight away. So in some of the automation software, we do see flights not closed out after flights are conducted. Just small things like this you need to keep on your remote pilots because it is very easy just to click and forget. You go and do your flight, then keep going. Remote RP is not flying within the approved area. This one we see commonly. They'll mark their areas digitally and then they'll go and fly out of that area. So keep an eye on that type of thing. Approved times, that's another one. Pilots think they're approved, but they don't realise the approval may be a time period, might be between 10 and 12. They've got to site at 9 and thought they'd fly. They're now out of that approval time. So I've seen a lot of records lacking for the assessments and training. Like it has probably most likely been done. You just got to remember it's digital, so you've got to go and do it in there. You might have a paper version you need to convert, depends how you set up. And it's just the upkeep of documents in the digital environment. I've seen a lot where people forget to update their REOC certificate. They forget to update the new ops manual within the compliance software. They may have everything all correct, but they haven't updated it into the software. So, do you want to talk about bars?
Yeah, I can.
You can talk
about
bars.
It's something, and I know there's a few of these ones that are introducing it on this call.
Bars is all yours.
Bars is probably, I was just in WA at an oil gas conference, and I think that's the only question that I got sort of, remote operations and bars. It's becoming more and more requirement. Look, it was periodical like mostly the mines. However, I did just see a tender from a government come out saying that they needed bars audits. So, something to be aware of. That get some support to get through it the first time.
It's quite in depth audit. It's not a walk in the park. It's
more in depth than a surveillance.
It really is. It really is. So just be aware that you put some time into it. It is meticulous. They do go deep into your operation. They're very much it's a great thing, but it is overkill for the drone world at the moment. But as operations have become more complex, I can see it having its place. But do allow plenty of time on it. It does take several months, doesn't it, really, to get sorted?
It's about $3,900 US. That's with an auditing company. We don't do the audits, by the way. We just support people to get the audits done. And it just does take a few months.
But you have your head around it before you try and go through the audit. Make sure you get all the information you can from the Flight Safety Foundation website.
You know what? Mark's just put a blog out. Go look on our website.
Yeah, do that.
All information and checklist on there. So we'll try to solve that for you. All right.
Okay. Next one. And just CASA surveillance events. I've been asked in the past what happens. So look,
don't stress.
Don't stress. Just do what you normally do. What you expect is a notification from them that comes with a call or email. As I said before, CASA, they only have your ops manual. They know your operation by your ops manual. So if what you're doing doesn't align with your ops manual, you're going to have issues straight away. So you need to make sure that is all synchronized, I guess. So it has to align. So, and inspectors just work through a checklist. It's a tick of the flick exercise, isn't it, really? Like they want to make sure that you're ticking the boxes. They'll pick certain packages of flights and you know, and they'll just look through it and make sure everything is what they want to see. So
I treat it as a positive thing, especially as we write like a lot of BVLOS and, you know, close proximity safety cases. A lot of the safety objectives out of those, you know, require your company to be checked by a third party. So when it's actually a really good thing when you're starting to move to more complex, because you've had someone do an operational check, which means we can actually claim that. That shows you know, you're an organisation that does follow safety and things like that. So use it as a positive event.
And it's not as scary as it made out. The guys are usually really good. They'll sit there with you. They'll discuss the problems. You already know what they're going to find. And
I don't know how they pick it. I mean, everyone's meant to have one every 3 years. I think when we put in a lot of really weird applications, so I usually get them every year. But so I think the more complex you do, you are expecting more surveillance events. But the last month, we've seen a lot of our sole operators that we work with getting them, and they've never had them before. So I think they're working through a lot of sole operators at the moment as well.
So yeah, rule is basically just do what your ops ranger's doing. It's just another day. They just come and visit, and they'll just pull you up on where you may be deficient. So next one, Mark. And finally, for me, just some subscriptions that I recommend that you should really be assigned to with your emails. It does help you get a lot of information. So that's all on the screen. I'm not going to read them all out, but does definitely help if you have some information coming into your inbox that is relevant. I've got these guys, and they keep me up to date. But it's a lot harder when you haven't got a Phil and Dylan by your side to let you know all the changes. So.
Well, actually, you know what? Subscribe to, you know, our list. Like, we actually do send emails out when all this changes. We have a newsletter that goes out, and we try, you know, the clients that we're working with every day, we usually try to let them know of new changes that are happening as well.
And as Jackie said many times, just reach out if you need some help. That's what we do. So.
Okay, questions for Jarrod. Make sure they're really hard. Well, actually, we'll have a hard one for Jarrod.
Yes, so just firstly, I'll just remind everyone, yep, we are recording the call. We're just not going to record the Q&A session at the end. So Ashley, your question was...
if it's really like one that I'm going to have to give a really bad answer to, save these for the end,
So Ashley has asked, can you talk about CRP personal liability under CASA and whether you recommend CRP have personal liability insurance?
What are your thoughts on that?
I hold professional indemnity as a company, so for CRP, because we do outsourcing CRP, so I'm CRP for a lot of people. My professional indemnity insurance is really, really expensive, just to let you all know. So I'm not, because it's on a personal, so we're all covered. So I've never looked at it from a personal liability point of view, because I know I hold it from that.
I mean, in the past, this is talking from the man, but as a chief pilot, I've been told all types of things. You know, I've been told set up a trust and work behind that, and all types of things. So it's really something on a case-by-case basis that you need to see where you stand with it. If something were to go wrong and it goes down that avenue, I guess you need to.
We put a lot of things in place, and this is why I didn't sort of open it up for remote pilots as well. We put a lot of things in place, you know, our JSAs and things, they're all changeable. So even if you're using compliance software and it comes with a stock standard CASA manual, we change that to, you know, put a little bit back on that remote pilot. So the question of the JSA is, you know, do you hold all those qualifications? Are you appropriately trained?
Make them have accountability.
You know, I'm safe? Like, and they have to tick that for that flight, because that means they're accountable. So if something happens, it also goes back on that remote pilot. As long as you've got all your, you know, you've trained them and you've got all your systems and your compliance in order. Like I said, don't try to throw my remote pilots under the bus.
It really is it's a case-by-case basis to what cover you think you need. And and we just put some accountability back on the pilot, just so they have an understanding, they have an obligation to operate appropriately too.
We also, fill out of this in, we also get the CRP to sign off on the operations, no, not the CRP, sorry, the CEO to sign off on the operations manual as well, just so that, you know, they're also responsible for this.
Cool. Question again from Luke. On the DJI logs not syncing, have you found where the issue lies, or if this is being looked at by DJI?
I can come back to you later, Luke. I'm chatting with Adam. No, look, it's actually at the moment, it's more coming up under the new drones, like the thermal and the 350. I'm actually chatting to Adam this afternoon, so I might be able to come back to you with further answers on that, of when they're going to get a patch out to fix some of this.
Question from Amy, does the use of online training / inductions need to be specified in the REOC, which is clarified there, the manual?
Yeah, in the manual.
Yeah.
We do have the
Yeah,
process. We do have the process in the manual just to identify that, yes, we have the option to either do it in person or remotely. So just to outline how it's done.
We just, you know what, just how we operate, we just put in the manual, because then when we get a surveillance event, you know,
It all lines up.
it's also someone else checking
Yeah.
that, you know, I've had this approved.
That's all the questions for now. One more?
One more.
Have I missed one?
Just read it, Mark.
Oh, yeah. Are there links to how many REOCs, limits to how many REOCs you can be the CRP?
Catherine asks me on this all the time. I think they are going to limit. So after you've sort of got your one, the second CRP interview is usually more on your bandwidth. The thing is, some REOCs only have 2 people on it, some have lots. So I get asked that all the time. How do you manage it? I show them the automation and how all the systems and procedures are set up, and the support, the type specialist, senior remote pilot, training system set up. Legally, no, there is absolutely no limit they can stop you on. I have a feeling they are going to put limitations in place. We have been warned. So I am expecting to see that over the next year, but no, there's no legal requirement to stop you. They just want to know how you work in a work week, like, you know, how do you manage that? So
management.
yeah, like if you're doing a second one, they will ask you, they'll ask you, how do you manage your time? And I just talk about automation.
Just a comment suggestion from Chris here that they recently renewed their own liability and indemnity insurance. Our normal business policy was starting to put on work rule restrictions on our drone ops because they're a photo business, and they ended up going to an air-specific policy for precision autonomy.
Yep. No, we have that too. Check your policies, especially if you're a university or something on.
Yeah.
There's a lot of really old clauses that I remember that came out in about 2015 and 16 through QBE and that, and Simon probably did that. Simon Hooper probably did the wording then, but obviously it changed it. It sort of stated visual line of sight, and there's some wording. So as you start to move more complex, go back and get your insurance policy checked to make sure you're allowing to do, you know, how ours is written now. It's we can do everything that we're approved through the legislation. So everything we're approved to do, we're now accepted. But some old clauses do have limitations on it.
Another one from AJ. What are your thoughts regarding the use of simulators as part of induction training, currency, approval applications, etc.?
Well, do you know the actual rulings for it though? Like, what are the requirements from CASA?
Oh, so there's no
requirement?
specific requirement for the smaller RPA systems. There would be, obviously, if you moved into large RPA systems and requirements, but really the key there is the I guess how good the simulator is. What does it? Is it accurately providing a good tool to people, and conversely ensuring that it doesn't induce bad habits in individuals if it's not a really complete simulator. So really it just comes down to the product and what's available.
Look, I'm using
happy to use them all my career
Yeah.
in defence, but again,
It's a different level,
it was almost a one-to-one. What we had in the simulator was replicated for what we actually had in our control station. So very some minor differences, but you could use it, and it was agreed to be a one-to-one. If I did an hour in the simulator, I could accrue, that was an hour flight time for me, but it'll come down to the abilities of the system.
I'm a big fan of simulators, especially as people move into BVLOS, you know, they're using ArduPilot, or we're getting a lot of BVLOS applications using Delta Quads and Evos and that at the moment. So there's a lot of simulator programs for them, and I usually make that as part of the internal the internal type sign off is they've got to do, you know, all the fail safes and all of that through simulators and be able to do multiple missions on the simulator before we even actually walk out in the field.
Cool. Questions look clear for now.
Oh, this is to me.
Right.
I'm going to be very diplomatic with these sort of that next session, additional approvals working group. I'm sort of going to say just what's been out. I will give some more opinionated responses in the Q&A.
I don't want that recorded.
I am happy. Look, yeah. Yeah, so as all of you mentioned, I sit on a lot of working groups, and I do actually spend the time to read every consultation that comes out, and usually reply. In the past, when I was on the board of AUS, I did assist with that, but I will continue. Now I'm not on the board, but I will continue to advocate for, what we all as industry need, my mines, my utility, and the clients that want to move to the BVLOS and that area will definitely be still advocating for you 100%. Department, I can't see where we're up to. Department of Infrastructure. So really quickly, the Department of Infrastructure, plus all their very long name, which I'm not going to say, they're in control of policy for drones. So all of you hopefully have been on drones.gov.au. It is probably, a site that we go on to all the time. So if you haven't, you need to write this down right now. You need to go on and have a look. So there's external policies that may come from, reasons in why, like noise approvals from the Chicago Convention and things like that. So you all are meant to have a noise approval. You can get this on that drones.gov.au. It doesn't mean you just go in and put
self-assessment.
It's a self-assessment, which is great, but you do need to have this approval and you need to save that approval through your, to be compliant. Unless you're a drone delivery operation or you're starting to fly, over people, constantly, it's really just a self-assessment and tick, and then you get a thing. If you are in one of those others, you will then have to, make contact with them and arrange an assessment on that.
Yeah, annual as well, I think.
And the annual.
Yeah.
So go in. The same with on this website, you can get a lot about privacy. We get a lot of questions about, can we fly over that house? Like, what can we do? What the department has done is they've collated all of the different rules and regulations, not aviation safety, and put them there as guidance. They've done it for commercial operators, but what they've also done is if you have people like general public, they're confused, you can direct them to this website. They can go as the general public and read, hey, you're actually not doing anything wrong by flying over their house. You're flying, breaking the rules, but you're not doing anything wrong. So it gives that guidance as well. So definitely, a page to go through and have a look. The one thing that they have launched over the last few weeks was something, the digitization of the rules. Now, this is non-safety rules. So on this website, you'll go onto here and there'll be a map. In the past, we have seen the CASA wraps as also, it'll come up if you're in a national park or things like this. This is the start of what they're going to do. This will eventually be put across to the FIMS, which we'll talk about in a second. Now, as you can see from this picture, anything in orange, there is now a flight restriction. What is confusing, and this is why you need to go look, this is not, well, I'm not saying this is not based off aviation safety. So they've put all the restrictions in for here for national parks of what it is, or they've put them here, they're going to put them here for the correctional facilities. And also one that they've just told me they're going to put in is the schools. Apparently can't fly over schools in Victoria. Now, if we go to the next slide, Mark. This is apparently law. I find it really, really confusing, and enough that I'm like, oh, I actually, stopped 180 pilots from flying until I got further clarification, because, in the past, we'd always seen it as you could fly, over a national park, but you couldn't take off and land unless you had approvals. I just need to read which one that is. So what we're starting to see, some of them are coming up, so be conscious of this. And if you do have concerns, we don't fly a lot, so, but I know this is going to affect a lot of you in a major way. So you need to start, speaking up, and I'll talk to you about the working groups or go through to the AUS or something like that. This one has a flight restriction up to 1,500 feet. But then if you go into your VTC, it's not there. So if you go to the next one, so just to be aware that they're here, the ones, where I sort of have a hard time understanding is that this is the department putting this out, but it feels like it's for, financial benefit as well. So, commercial, for this new area here, you can fly over if you are recreationally, but you can't fly if you're commercially. So I'm not sure how eventually, as we automate this and go to a FIMS, this is all going to work. But basically, the way that it's written now is you can't fly for a lot of those orange areas from ground to space. everywhere in between for an uncrewed aircraft unless you get permission. As I said, I don't agree with it, but as I said, we can talk more about this at the Q&A. My advice as well, please, I don't even know how we do this, but we need to like get together as industry, and you know, people from the mines and utilities, you've all got specific needs, and it's like we almost need to, have a representative from each. Do jump onto these like these policy forums. I need you to we need to speak out to what you actually need. Otherwise, you know what, we might end up 3 years down the track with something we didn't need and have to pay for it, or in the wrong order. It's not going to help you grow. So really actively be involved. So that's I recommend you all get on this. It's a new working group. They're going to put multiple groups together to discuss all of the policy elements. Please just don't think because you haven't been following track and reading every consultation like I have that you can't input it. What I actually find the most benefit when I sit in these working groups is to have what you do. You know what is going to help you grow in your area. So don't feel nervous about applying it. Next slide. Next slide. So Air Services and FIMS. So the client lead provided me some, information of where they at of this. So I'm going to let you flick to the next page, and you can sort of read this. But as we know, in the past, us as all CRPs on this call, we've probably only dealt with CASA. As we start to move forward, the department, this is how I feel anyway, the Department of Air Services, are having more and more to do. Maybe they always did, but it feels like there's more and more to do with what we, like how we're going to get to what we want. So please just don't pay attention to what CASA is doing. As I said, look what Air Services and the department is doing as well. At the moment, Air Services control the 29 towers with the 2 air traffic control centres in Melbourne and Brisbane. Next page. What is the UTM at FIMS? So the FIMS is something that had to be created because of the NEAT policy that came out. I think, I can't remember if it was in May 21, like May a few years ago, it came out and it gave the direction to Air Services to create a FIMS. Now, so that's what they've been working on. Oh, sorry. Yeah, what's a FIMS? Sorry. Flight Information Management System. So it's sort of like, I'm still not sure if we 100% need, but it's like a heart of that program. And then, like, if you can imagine, like, it controls all these rules and how it's all managed. And then USSs or UTM providers, which is the Uncrewed Traffic Management. There's lots around the world. There's ANRA, there's Wing, and they'll all feed in to get that data from that. So they're creating, and they've been actively working over the last years doing trials. They did announce a few weeks ago that Frequentis did win the bid to actually develop that FIMS. So they're going to be working that over the next year. One of the first things they're going to start to see to implement is, how we've got automated approvals using the CASA apps at the moment. One of the first things that they'll probably introduce is the rest of the airports to get automated approvals to fly near controlled airspace, which I think is a really positive thing. I mean, 2 questions. It's like, well, now we unfortunately they've sort of said the FIMS will be later next year. You'll have to wait for the automated approvals for that. But even though the CASA apps are working well, it'd be really interesting to see if the CASA apps could just get the other airspace to help streamline this process and all these CASA wait times that we're currently facing. See if that could solve it in the meantime. But that's things that you guys need to figure out if that's what you want and push that towards. Air Services did that, commissioned the report. They predict there's going to be a 20% growth per annum over the next 20 years. And by 2043, which is 20 years, 60 million flights conducted daily. So we definitely need to work out how we're going to, manage all of that different airspace. Next slide. I sort of went through that. It's fine.
You've done that one.
What's next? So they've also got, working group, a USAM working group as well. So that's available if you want to jump on that working group, go on to their website, which it's coming up next slide. I do recommend it. So, you know, in the future, their outcome, I'll just flick back, Mark, one more. Their outcome, like what is a UTM and FIMS? Like that's what I think we need to have more education on. And it's something that I've been advocating towards, you know, like organizations like AUS and Say Skies and other things like that, sort of, you know, help people try to understand what that UTM is and what does that mean for you. You know, we did see some speeches at the AUS event a few weeks ago saying they're going to be used, the UTM, for, you know, strategic and tactical mitigations for beyond visual line of sights. Look, there's a lot of confusing, which is great. Look, but how do we get there as well? Like, what do we need? And I will be talking a little bit about the green and white paper. Like, for me, if we're going to use this for this, we need to know where everything is. Like, there's a lot of out of here. I can see there's a lot of like agriculture and utilities and mines. What do we actually need? Like, we want to fly BVLOS. We want to know where the crewed air traffic is. We want to be able to deconflict with that. But at the moment, like some of our biggest challenges when we write safety cases is that stakeholder engagement. We don't know where everyone is. And so, you know, things like mandatory ADS-B or electronic conspicuity, I pick that word, but like that's the stuff that we need. But so I'm not sure how the FIMS, because there's no policy direction yet. So I think, and I'll just talk about it even though it's a few slides away, but with the green and the white paper, it was sort of, that was the vision for that next 50 years of aviation. What comes out, which will be in the next, we're going to get the final paper in the white paper in mid this year. And it'll be really interesting then if, you know, it does have that direction, if we're going to have mandatory ADS-B for all crewed traffic, which I think is the best and safest way to move forward. If we can all know where each other's are, we can start to deconflict. It'll also then start to, that paper will also give the direction if we're going to have, you know, remote ID and things like that. So the paper released this year is a really crucial part to our future in the drone area. So my highly recommendation, and we probably will just run a session on the paper when it released, read this, read it when it comes out, make sure if you need to put consultation and make sure the direction they're going is actually what you need to do. So you can click back. So you're getting advice. Definitely, as I said, get involved. That's the only way. We will support, like if you know, if you're really nervous of that, please send through, you know, to me, or you can go to like organizations or industry bodies like AUS, or there's others out there as well that are in this space. That's just the link. So what it looks like, because I know what it's hard when you, so that's where you sign up. Next page. The CASA regulatory roadmap, there was a lot of industry spent a lot of time on this. So I remember just before Christmas a few years ago, working out what did we need now in the next 2 years at that time, what did we need in 5 years, and what did we need in 10 years to grow. So it was a joint effort from the ASIP group. So, you know, people from the regulator side, and a list of came out. So they've been working towards it. It needs to be reviewed. Obviously, you know, the industry didn't quite, you know, I think it was like at that time we all thought, you know, AAM and, you know, the Uber flying cars in Melbourne were going to be here by 2024, which isn't sort of happening. So it does need to be reviewed. And I believe they are going to do an update mid this year. So start going to the next slide. You can actually sign up for the technical working groups. This is real value. You just put what interests you, and then you get selected to be on these different working groups as well. Yeah. Oh, poll. Hang on, everybody. This one might be a little bit conflicting because it was sort of a random, but it'll be like, look, nice to, you know, we are all in this together. I always look at it that no one sort of really competes with each other. We all need to move the industry forward in a safe way, because if something happens, you know, it'll impact all of our businesses. So we all need to work together and things like that. But this is just one, is what is your wish list from CASA? Did I say select one, or what did we do? Or order them? It'd be nice to know what, yeah, order in your priority of what you want first. And I'll pass this through to the industry bodies and that, so they can utilize the leverage. While everyone's still filling that out, look, we are going to move to questions after this, but firstly, look, I thank my amazing team for sort of putting this together, and it's something we want to continue to do. We're really in a position that we do get to, you know, have lots of meetings with CASA and Air Services and the department and things, and we want to give back. As I said, we really believe that we all need to work together to grow the industry, and it's going to benefit all of us in the long run. You know, happy to sort of, you know, have a consultation if you sort of want to ring me, happy to sort of look at your BVLOS or whatever you need as well. So just sort of reach out by email. I will send an email out to everyone with some information at the end of this. We've got the in.
Yeah, so it's kind of evened out across all of them.
Okay.
Still expected wait times, list KPIs shot to the top and stayed there consistently though.
Yep.
That's probably reflective of the guidance people need right now. And then more consistent reviews for applications, guidance for flying near people, and guidance and expectations on acceptable means of compliance for standard operations like above 400 feet BVLOS, and then BVLOS and other.
Okay, perfect. All right, so what we'll do, Mark, can you, we are having this as more of an open forum, so can they take their videos off when they're talking now or not? It's still, can they talk?
We'd still have to unmute people individually, and yeah.
Okay, go to Q&A if you want to talk, because we can unmute you, but we're going to turn the video off now. Look, feel free to flick through any questions we have and sort of, you know, happy, because this is meant to help you. And I know sometimes, as I said, I'm just so lucky that, you know, sometimes I'm freaking out going, oh my gosh, like this has happened, like, you know, how am I going to be, you know, responsible or liable, or, you know, how do I sort this out? And I've got an amazing team, but I get so many of you don't have anyone to turn to. So this is a chance. Please remember everyone to be respectful of the people asking questions. We've got people here that, you know, have been chief pilots for years and years and years, but I can also see there's a lot of people that, you know, are new to being a CRP. So just be respectful of everyone's different levels. And hopefully you found it super interesting. Hopefully everyone learned something. Yeah, it'd be good to get any feedback you have at the end of this as well.